Welcome to Around the World in 40 Tales. My name is Doreen Vanderstoep. Today's episode features once again Storytelling Alberta member and provincial and Calgary chapter treasurer extraordinaire Anne Cowling. Today, Anne will share a story that originates in Princeton, New Jersey, called Erik Weihenmayer, the man who defeated the hopesuckers. Before we dive in, we wish to acknowledge that Storytelling Alberta operates on the traditional territories of the Indigenous signatories to Treaties 4, 6, 7, 8, and 10. This land includes the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta. We make this declaration in the spirit of gratitude and reconciliation. Anne Cowling has been writing stories since she was 6 years old. She enjoys telling all kinds of stories, especially folk tales, but also personal stories, the adventures and pratfalls and moments of joy in everyday life. Today's story is an inspiring biographical story about perseverance and hope. I give you Anne Cowling.
Now, I'd like to tell you the story of Erik Weihenmayer, the man who defeated the hopesuckers. Erik Weihenmayer was born in 1968 in Princeton, New Jersey. He was the youngest of 4 children, and when he was just a little tiny baby, his parents noticed that there was something rather strange about the way his eyes were working. They seemed to be flickering around and doing strange things. That ended up with a 2 or 3 year odyssey from one specialist to another, all of which had different opinions. Finally, they ended up at a world-renowned clinic in Boston, Massachusetts. And there they received the diagnosis. Erik had a dysfunction of the retinas called retinochiosis, which meant that his retinas had already separated from his, detached themselves from his eyes, and he only had peripheral vision, even though he was unusually young for this to happen. He would be able to see for a while until his early teens, and then his retinas would split apart because of the pressure in his eyeballs, and then he would lose his vision altogether. Well, this was a hard diagnosis to take. The family went home, and his mother, who was a very determined person, immediately set the house into organization. She set up systems for Erik so that he could find his way around and do the things he needed to do. When he was 4 years old, he was given a pair of what he called bottle glasses, which were 1/4 inch thick glasses, and he could read a printed word if he held the paper right up to his face. When he was 8, he was given a monocular, and he was able to see vision at a distance, and also, to his joy, join his family in movies and be able to watch the action, which was a total revelation for him. When he was 12, he sort of noticed that his vision seemed to be not as good. For a while, he told himself that maybe the sun was too bright, or maybe it was too dark, or maybe the air was dry. But eventually he had to tell himself that his vision was really not as good as it had been. In his year of being 13, it was a terrible year. His retinas split into several pieces, and he had multiple images, of which only one was right. And that led to some bad accidents. He once fell off a dock by following the wrong image. At the age of 14, he'd lost his vision altogether, so the prophecy had come true. Now, I don't know if you remember being 14, but it's a very critical time for anyone, especially a young guy who wants to be cool. He did not want to be in the present. He wanted to be back in the past, shooting baskets with his friends and bombing around on his bicycle and having fun. Not only that, in in Connecticut, where they lived, it's the first year of high school, as you might know, and he was now in a new school where there were people who had not known him when he still had sight. He did not want to be a blind dork with a white cane and a sheaf of braille under his arm, and he resisted every effort to help him adjust to his new situation. It was hard to know what to change things for Erik, but a few things started going right. One was that he started to find a love for language, the beauty of words, and he realized it was only his fumbling with braille that prevented him from seeing those wonderful words on the page. He also realized, although he might fumble a bit in daylight with his white cane, at nighttime, when he was bombing through the woods with his friends, he ran faster and better than his friends who were stumbling about in the dark. Then came the time for him to sign up for sports, and he realized suddenly, to his surprise, that he now had an opportunities he hadn't had before. Oh yes, team sports were out, but he'd never been able to do contact sports while he still had vision, because he might impair the vision that he got. Now he had no vision, he could go right ahead. So what was there out there? Wrestling. Wrestling. A blind kid wrestling. So he signed up. And then he found he was very good at wrestling. He was a tough, wiry guy, not too big at the start, but that first day, he was able to hold off a pin from the team captain twice as long as any of the other newbies on the team. He found he had, in his short time of having no vision, he had developed skills that sighted kids didn't have. For instance, he could hear the opponent moving around on the mat, and he could anticipate what strategy they were just about to use and catch them by surprise. Then he also could tell from a handshake the fitness level of his opponent. And if it was a soft handshake, he would listen to hear them tiring, and he would know to press his advantage. After a month or two, the first meet came up, and at the last minute, Erik was substituted when one of the senior wrestlers was injured. The coach said later that he felt that he was feeding him to the sharks. But Erik won his bout and brought the house down. It was wonderful. And over the years, Erik became the team captain. And eventually, he and the team went off to represent their state at the national championships. Life went on for a bit. After about a year and a half, Erik went off to a blind skills training camp in near Boston, Massachusetts. It was a summer camp, a month-long summer camp. And amongst the many activities offered was climbing. Blind kids climbing. But everyone was doing it. So Erik signed up. And that day, all of them made it to the top of the cliff face. Erik found he had skills that possibly sighted people didn't have. He was good at reading the rock and anticipating when a crack had disappeared and that it could reappear later on. He was a natural. Then there was the thrill of making it to the top of the cliff. Wow, that was a buzz. And he was hooked. Well, I'll fast forward through the next bit. Life went on. He graduated from high school. He went to Boston College for university. He still had his love of language. He got a double major in English and communications. He also had a master's in education. He now had a guide dog called Wizard, and he was pretty independent. Then he encountered his first real hope suckers. Oh yes, he'd had bullies in his past in grade school. There'd also been hope suckers when he was just starting at school. He'd gone into regular school, but his mother had a fight and she won. But now Erik was looking for a job, and he would go off to interviews at the school, and immediately he knew who was in the room. Their voices would drop and they would say, "How do you think you're going to do this? And what about that?" He had all the answers. He had plenty of experience after a while, but he knew that there'd already been a line through his name. And they would seize his elbow and lead him out, not asking if he needed any help, with his guide dog trailing behind him. But 5 schools believed in him, and he had 5 job offers. He chose to go to Phoenix just because it was a different part of the US. And I could say a lot about his time at his school at Phoenix teaching grade 5, but there was also something else. He was now close to the mountains, and he could get back to his passion for climbing. He found a couple of friends, and they became weekend climbers, tackling more and more difficult peaks. Until, and Erik, he wanted to be an equal part of the team. So if there was something that he wasn't able to handle on a climb, he would work on it the next day. For instance, how do you set up your own tent on the side of Mount Rainier when it's -20 centigrade, there's a gale force wind blowing, and your hands, which are your eyes, are encased in down mitts? The next day found him outside his school in 30-degree weather, in a tank top and down mitts, putting up and taking down his tent, putting it up and taking it down, until he knew that tent inside out. In 1995, the team decided to climb Denali, the first of the 7 summits. And the next 6 years, he climbed more of the 7 summits. 2001, he climbed Mount Everest. In 2002, he climbed the last of the 7 summits. And in 2008, just to make sure, he climbed Mount Carstens in Indonesia, which at 16,000 feet is a more demanding configuration of the 7 summits. Already he was becoming known as an inspirational, motivational speaker ever since Denali, which had been funded by the American Institute for the Blind, Foundation for the Blind. There'd been a film made, and that had certainly gave him a lot of notice from the media. In 2005, he founded the organization No Barriers, with the tagline, "Whatever is within you is stronger than whatever is in your way." And I could talk a lot more about what No Barriers does. It's to help people facing challenges of whatever kind in their lives. But where does this story end? He's had more and more adventures, but the story ends with today, with Erik, who is now able to contemplate the future, whatever challenges lie ahead, and is okay about the present. And sometimes that can be a challenge even greater than climbing Mount Everest.
Thank you, Anne, for your inspiring story, which encourages us all to climb the mountains we need to in our lives. For anyone who wants to reach out to Anne or anyone at Storytelling Alberta, you can contact us at info@storytellingalberta.com. And do join us on our website, www.storytellingalberta.com, where we have a number of different video offerings to celebrate our 40th anniversary. Thanks to all of you for joining us around the world.